With so many big cities in the world, there are places that really make you wonder, why do people live here? But if there's one city with the most unusual location, this is probably it. A city in the middle of Siberia. With the harshness of winter here, the average temperature drops down to minus 42 degrees Celsius. There are weeks when it doesn't even go above minus 40, that's how cold it is. If you go outside even for just a few minutes, you could get hurt. Your fingers can get frostbite within 3 to 7 minutes. Your nose and cheeks, just 5 to 8 minutes. And even if you're bundled up properly, you're still not safe from the effects of the cold. Even vehicles give up. The engine oil turns into something as thick as glue. The fuel lines freeze. The battery dies. The tires can burst. Even metal becomes brittle and can break. That's why people here don't turn off their vehicles. So at night, they let them run for several hours. That's why parking lots look like a sea of running vehicles. Even food isn't safe. The groceries you bought can turn into solid ice before you even get home. And at the market, there's no need for a freezer. The fish are just left out. Whether it's for a day or a week, it's fine. But before we continue, please like this video. It means a lot to us content creators. Thank you very much. The air here is even colder than a freezer. The name of this city is Yakutsk. At first glance, it looks like a small and remote place, but it's not. More than 370,000 people live here. It's a real city. In fact, this is the largest city in the world built on permafrost. That means the ground is permanently frozen. And here, a big problem begins. Farming is almost impossible. It's hard to grow crops. It's hard to produce your own food. That's why the city relies on supplies from other places. And because of the distance, prices go up. Food is more expensive. Transportation is more expensive. The cost of living is higher. The city is the capital of the Sakha region in Russia. It's an extremely vast area. If you put it on the map of the United States, it would cover almost half of the country. But even though it's this big, the population is less than 1 million, and almost 40% are in Yakutsk alone. This means the entire region's economy revolves around this city. Despite the extremely harsh climate, there are universities, malls, theaters, and tall buildings here. A modern city in the midst of extreme cold. The lowest temperature ever recorded here is minus 64 degrees Celsius. It's almost unbelievable. It's even colder than some parts of Mars. So the question is, why is there such a big city in a place like this? The answer isn't the climate, but money and resources. This is the reality. No matter how difficult the place is, if people have a reason to stay, they will stay. And in Yakutsk, that reason is stronger than the cold. In the same place where Yakutsk is located, some of the lowest temperatures in the world have also been recorded here. Outside of Antarctica and Greenland, this is where you will find the most extreme cold. But surprisingly, none of those places have a large city. There aren't hundreds of thousands of people living there, but Yakutsk does. And for that reason alone, it's already unique. It's like a big puzzle. Why is there such a large city in a place that's almost uninhabitable for people? And how do people live here every day? If we look back in history, people have been living around Yakutsk for thousands of years. But there were only a few people scattered and isolated. Honestly, almost no one wanted to live here before because of the harsh climate. It's like in a strategy game. It's the kind of place you choose only because of the resources, not because it's a nice place to live. The first people who lived here were the Sakha people. They call themselves Sakha. They arrived in the area around the 13th to 14th century. They came from farther south near Lake Baikal. They were forced to move because of the expansion of the Mongols. They are part of the Turkic group. And until now, their language still has similarities with the languages in Central Asia. But the real change came when Russia entered Siberia. Starting in the 16th century, Russian territory gradually expanded. And the reason was wealth, particularly fur. At that time, fur was like money. It was used in trade, and it had high value in the international market. In 1632, Russian explorers arrived in the area, and they built a small fort. That simple outpost would become Yakutsk in the future. By the 1640s, Russia had already taken control of the area, and they used the fort as a center for collecting fur. The local people gave fur as tribute. In exchange, they were allowed to live in their own way. At that point, no one could have imagined that this place would become a big city. But Yakutsk had one important advantage: its location on the Lena River. The Lena River is one of the longest rivers in the world. It stretches for thousands of kilometers, from Lake Baikal to the Arctic Ocean. And because of this, it became an important transportation route. In the summer, it serves as the main route for trade. More than 3,500 kilometers are navigable by ship. This means that even though the area is extremely cold, it has a connection to other parts of the world. And that's where growth began. It's not because of a good climate, but because of access to resources and transportation. In the end, it's clear that Yakutsk is not just any city. It's proof that location, wealth, and strategy are stronger than nature. The important detail here is the word "in the summer," because the river can only be used for 70 to 125 days each year, depending on the exact location. That's the only time when the Lena River can be traversed. For the rest of the year, it freezes. Sometimes it's solid ice. Sometimes it's full of small chunks of ice. It makes any kind of navigation difficult. This means the time for transport is limited. But even so, Yakutsk still became important. Because during summer, it becomes a center of trade. Furs from different places are brought here. Then they're sent up and down the river until they reach a more accessible area near Lake Baikal. From there, it's much easier to bring the products to European Russia, especially after the Trans-Siberian Railway was built. For many centuries until the mid-1800s, the Sakha region was mostly used as a source of wealth for Russia, a resource-based area. Almost everything revolved around fur. You can't rely on agriculture because the land is frozen. That's why the population is limited, jobs are limited, and economic growth is limited. Because if you can't produce your own food, it's hard to grow a community. By the late 19th century, Yakutsk was still small. In the 1897 census, the population was only about 6,500, and most of the Russians there were still in the fur trade. But when the 20th century came, everything changed. In 1922, the Soviet Union was established, and the Sakha region was made an autonomous part under the Russian system. A new era began, and just a year later something was discovered. In 1923, Soviet geologists found gold in the southern part of the area, and this is where the real change began. From a simple place known for fur, it became a center of greater wealth. And where there is gold, people and businesses follow. And rapid economic growth followed. This is where Yakutsk, as we know it today, began to become a city. Just 2 years after gold was discovered, everything changed immediately. By 1925, more than 13,000 people from Russia and Ukraine had arrived in the area. There was one reason: gold and opportunity. This is where the gold rush in Sakha began, and from then on, the place was never the same again. But there was a problem. There weren't enough people willing to mine voluntarily. It wasn't enough to meet the government's target, so the Soviet government under Joseph Stalin came up with another way. They brought in forced labor through a system known as the Gulag. Across the Sakha region, they built almost 100 camps, prisons, and penal colonies, and more than 50,000 prisoners were brought here. They were used as labor force in gold mining. In fact, this wasn't an entirely new system. Even back in the time of the Tsars, Siberia was already used as a kind of prison, a place where you couldn't escape. Because even if you managed to escape, where would you go? The next place is thousands of kilometers away, and with the extreme cold and harshness of nature, it's almost impossible to survive alone. That's why strict guards weren't needed. The place itself became the prison. It was used for people the government didn't like, political enemies. People considered social problems, and because of this, the population quickly grew. Between 1926 and 1959, the population in Yakutsk swelled. From around 10,000, it reached over 70,000. It increased by more than 7 times. But there was another big change. The percentage of the native Saka people gradually decreased. In 1926, they were the majority, over 80%. But by 1959, this dropped to less than half. Because of the influx of people from other parts of the Soviet Union. In other words, the city didn't just grow. Its appearance also changed. From a quiet place in the middle of the ice, it became a center of mining, politics, and control. Like many cities in history, its growth came at a price. Gold wasn't the only wealth in the area, and it wasn't the most important one. As early as the 1930s, Soviet geologists noticed that some parts of Siberia resembled South Africa, and that's where the suspicion began. There might be diamonds here too. The search was only delayed because of the Second World War. But after that, exploration continued. In 1949, the first diamond was found in the Saka region. And just 5 years later, in 1954, something bigger was discovered. An extremely rich diamond deposit called Zarnitsa was found. This changed everything. It turned out that Saka is one of the richest in diamonds in the whole world, even surpassing many places except for southern Africa. And this is the real reason why the population grew even more. More people from Russia and Ukraine arrived, not just for gold, but now for diamonds. By the late 20th century, up to 25% of the global diamond supply came from Saka. That's a huge share of the world's supply. Because of this, new cities were built near the mines, from scratch. They used pre-built houses, and they brought in workers from other places. During the Soviet Union era, the income from diamond mining was very high, almost 4 times higher than the average salary. There were additional bonuses too. That was enough to encourage thousands of people to move, even though it was extremely cold, even though life was hard. And all of this fueled the growth of Yakutsk. The offices and headquarters of major mining companies were built here. In other words, Yakutsk is not just a city in the middle of the ice, it is a center of one of the most important industries in the world. And once again, it proved one thing: where there is wealth, people will follow. Since the 1960s, more than $1 billion worth of diamonds have been extracted every year from the Saka region. And that's not all. By the late 1980s, the combined mining of diamonds, gold, as well as tin and coal reached up to $4 billion in revenue each year. That was a huge amount for the Soviet Union, and because of this, Yakutsk developed rapidly. Between 1959 and 1989, the population almost doubled again. From 74,000, it grew to over 186,000. At the same time, the number of buildings increased. There were high-rise apartment buildings, museums, factories, and an airport. In short, from a small place, Yakutsk became a big city. And the reason is just one: wealth from the land. One of the biggest symbols of mining in the area is the Mir mine. It is one of the deepest and largest open-pit mines in the world. It reaches more than 500 meters deep and over 1 kilometer wide. It's really huge. In fact, there are helicopters that are not allowed to fly over it because of the unusual air currents created by the hole. But mining wasn't the only thing done in the area. In search of more resources, the Soviet Union also conducted an underground nuclear explosion in Saka. For 14 years, from 1974 to 1988, no less than 12 such explosions were carried out. The goal was to find minerals and make mining faster. But there was a price to pay. Not only the land was affected, but also the water. There was radioactive contamination in some parts of the area, and it made life even harder in a place that was already struggling. In the end, the story is clear. Yakutsk grew because of its wealth, but that wealth came with a price that is not easy to erase. And of course, the environment around Yakutsk is extremely harsh. It's one of the hardest places to build and run a city. There are many reasons why this is one of the coldest places in the world. Aside from Antarctica and Greenland, the first is its location. It's deep within the Eurasian continent. It's thousands of kilometers away from the ocean. Usually seas help make the climate milder, but here there's no such effect. Surprisingly, the climate is even milder in the northern part near the Arctic Ocean. There, the average temperature in January is around minus 20 degrees Celsius. But in Yakutsk, it reaches minus 40. It's colder farther south than in the north. The so-called Siberian high plays a big role in this. This is one of the strongest weather systems in the northern part of the world. From September to April, it brings extremely cold and dry air from the Arctic. And this air gets trapped in the middle of Siberia. Because of this, the temperature drops even further. Add to that the vast plains and forests covered with snow. The snow reflects heat from the Arctic. This causes the temperature to remain even lower. For weeks, the temperature doesn't even rise above minus 40 degrees Celsius. The lowest temperature recorded in the city was minus 64 degrees Celsius. It's almost unbelievable. And from November until the middle of March, the temperature doesn't even reach 0 degrees. Winter is long, dark, and merciless. But summer is also unique. It's the complete opposite. The heat can reach up to 41 degrees Celsius. From extreme cold, it suddenly becomes extremely hot. It's a place where both seasons are extreme. And despite all of this, there is still a city that thrives. It's proof of how resilient people can be when they have a reason to stay. This means that Yakutsk has one of the most extreme temperature changes in the world. Within a year, the difference exceeds 100 degrees Celsius. From minus 60 in the winter to positive 40 in the summer. And even though the winter is extremely cold, it doesn't mean there are no problems in the summer. In fact, it's the opposite. In the summer, the place is filled with so many insects and mosquitoes. The area around the Lena River, including the wetlands and floodplains, becomes filled with water when the ice melts. But because the ground is permafrost, it doesn't easily absorb water. That's why water accumulates in many places. They become stagnant lakes and small pools. And this is the perfect place for mosquitoes to breed. Even though the extreme cold kills most insects in the winter, they come back in greater numbers during the summer. They multiply quickly, almost all at once. There are so many of them, they can cover your skin in just a few seconds when you're outside the city. This is one of the most intense mosquito swarms in the world. So it's not just the cold that's the enemy here, it's also the heat and the insects. And in this kind of environment, building a city is not easy. But despite this, Yakutsk is approaching a population of 400,000. It's one of the most unique and extreme places where people live in the world. Because it's located on permafrost, the ground underneath stays frozen all year round. It can reach hundreds of meters deep. At first glance, that might seem like a good foundation, but in reality, it's actually a problem. Because the heat from the building slowly melts the ice underneath. When it melts, the ground turns into mud. And when it turns into mud, the ground shifts, causing cracks in the foundation. The building slowly sinks and eventually it could collapse. That's why in Yakutsk, it's not just nature you're up against, but even the ground you walk on. Because of the problem with the soil, the way they build in Yakutsk is unique. Most houses and buildings are not built directly on the ground. Instead, they stand on posts that are buried up to 10 meters deep underground. This is done so that they won't be affected by the thawing of the ground ice. Even important lines like electricity and water pipes aren't buried underground. They're above ground, clearly visible. Because if they're placed underground, the permafrost might melt. And as the world gets warmer nowadays, the situation is getting even worse. The Arctic is warming faster than other parts of the world. And because of this, the ground beneath the city is gradually melting. As a result, the shape of the roads and sidewalks changes. It's like you're walking on small bumps and the buildings are gradually sinking. And no matter how good the engineering is, it's still not enough to stop this. The city is slowly giving way. This gives it a unique appearance, like an industrial city with a futuristic look. It becomes even more unique because of what's called, in most places, fog doesn't form when it's very cold. But here, it happens. Because of the extreme cold, the warm air from buildings, vehicles, and even people doesn't rise anymore. Instead, it immediately freezes. And it becomes like a cloud hanging over the city. In this kind of cold, even your breath freezes. In just a few minutes, your eyebrows and eyelashes start to freeze. Vehicles also don't last long. Usually they only last a few years. They also need to be kept running almost the entire winter. If not, the battery will die and the fuel will freeze. Even electric vehicles lose a large part of their range. Sometimes they can only go half as far. In Yakutsk, every day is a struggle. It's not just the cold, but also the environment that tests you. Even something as simple as arriving in or leaving Yakutsk is not easy. These days, it's still very difficult and very expensive because of the climate and because it's so far from other places. This is one of the hardest major cities in the world to reach. The easiest way is by plane. From Moscow or St. Petersburg, the trip takes about 6 to 7 hours. But even then, it's still not certain. In winter, delays are common because of thick fog. And sometimes it's because of the extreme cold, which can even affect the plane's fuel. If you think about driving, it's even harder. Honestly, the city is still not directly connected to other places by road. This is the largest city in Eurasia without a direct road connection to other cities. Before, the only connection was through the Lena highway, a long road that connects to a larger highway in the south, which is connected to the Trans-Siberian Railway. But before 2014, most of this road was not yet paved. During the rainy season and when the ice melts, the road turns to mud. Sometimes it becomes impassable for several weeks. This means the city's connection is completely cut off. Even after it was repaired and paved, there were still problems. It doesn't directly reach the city itself. The road is on the eastern side of the Lena River, while Yakutsk is on the opposite side. And up to now, there is still no bridge crossing the entire river. So even if there's a road, it's as if there isn't one. In Yakutsk, even just arriving is already a challenge. During the long winter, even though it's extremely cold, Yakutsk has a unique advantage because the Lena River freezes over. And when it completely freezes, it becomes like a road. Vehicles, trucks, and even people can cross. It becomes an important connection to other parts of Russia. But when summer comes, everything changes. The ice melts. The river flows. And the only way to cross is by ferry. This way, transport continues. But there's a problem between the two seasons. In spring and autumn, crossing is almost impossible. The ice is too thin. It can't support the weight of vehicles. Or it breaks up into small pieces. It becomes dangerous. During these times, Yakutsk becomes like a separate island. And even in summer, the ferry isn't enough for the number of people and goods that need to cross. The lines are long. The fare is expensive. In fact, a single trip can cost up to 15% of a person's monthly income, and you still have to wait for several hours. Because of this, some people take risks. They cross the river even when the ice is still thin. Sometimes they use vehicles. Sometimes they walk. And almost every year there are accidents, vehicles sink, people die. Most of the supplies in the city, especially food, still come from other places. These are brought in by ship during the summer or by trucks during the winter. Because of this, the prices of goods are higher. And even though the climate is harsh, the cost of living is still high. The construction of a bridge over the Lena River to finally connect the city to other places has been discussed for a long time. But until now, it still hasn't happened. For the Yakuts, even a simple crossing from one bank to the other is already a big challenge. Building a bridge over the Lena River is no easy task. It needs to withstand extreme natural conditions. In winter, the temperature can reach as low as minus 60 degrees Celsius. In summer, it can reach up to plus 40 degrees Celsius. Aside from this, it also needs to withstand strong ice flows during spring. Because of this, designing and building a bridge here is more expensive compared to other places. But it's not just nature that's causing the delay. World events are also a factor. As early as the 1980s, there were already plans for the bridge, but it was halted after the Soviet Union collapsed. In 2012, they tried again, but it was stopped again after Russia invaded Ukraine in 2014 and took Crimea. Because of this, the funds were redirected to building a bridge to Crimea. In 2019, the project was revisited. But then the pandemic happened in 2020, And in 2022, a bigger war started in Ukraine. Sanctions were imposed by other countries, and this made the project even more difficult. In 2024, the bridge construction process started again. At first, it was estimated to cost $855 million. But as time went on, the expenses almost doubled. It has already reached around $1.7 billion. And the funding from the government is still not enough, because spending on the war is being prioritized. That's why until now, it's still unclear if the bridge will ever be finished. And because of this, Yakutsk remains almost like an isolated island, a city that feels anything but normal. A place that continues to survive even in the harshest conditions. And just like it has done for a long time, it keeps on existing against all odds.
Here they are,